Welcome into the On3 studios here in Nashville, Tennessee. Today's Sunday. It's August 25th, and we're back. I'm back. Another episode of the Inside Scoop. A lot of stuff went on while I was gone for a week. A lot of stuff. You guys know it. Recruiting world went crazy over the last 7 days. Shout out to JD Pickett for picking the show up while I was gone. He filled in, so you guys didn't miss a thing, including 2 5-star commitments that went down on this channel. JD did one last Wednesday. That was Michael Fasusi, the 5-star offensive tackle out of Texas. He committed to Oklahoma right here on this channel. And then we had Jonah Williams yesterday. I was back for this one, and Jonah Williams, the 5-star safety out of Galveston, Texas. He committed to the Longhorns. That was a big one. We're going to get into it today, but before we get going, you guys hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. This is the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube, so jump on board, hit subscribe, and also thinking about signing up for On3 right now. You can for just $1. Use promo code BERG1. The season's about to get started. You want to read every inside update from Steve Wiltfong, from Chad Simmons, from Pete Nakos. Step your game up. Get ready for the season. Go use promo code BERG1 and sign up for On3 for just $1. All right. As I said, a lot of stuff went down over the weekend. Let's start with some of the big news over the past few days that made a big impact on the top 10. Here's some recent commitments. We had Jonah Williams yesterday going to Texas. Also yesterday, cornerback Aiden Anding commits to LSU. LSU, we talked to Shea Dixon about 8 days ago. He said LSU still needed to fill in that cornerback room. They're doing so. Also, Nick Brooks, he commits to Texas. The massive 6'7.5" offensive tackle out of Georgia is now a Longhorn. Onis Konanbaney, he commits to Tennessee as expected. Nate Marshall, he flips a commitment from Michigan to Auburn. Auburn is hot, and it's going to reflect in the rankings here that we're going to look at in a second. Offensive tackle Michael Fasusi, that was last Wednesday. He came off the board to Oklahoma. All right, let's take a quick look at these top 10 rankings. Not much has changed at the very top. You still got Ohio State, Alabama, LSU, UGA, but now Auburn. Auburn is in there at number 5. They have been making a slow creep, not only into the top 10, but now they are a top 5 recruiting program. Speaking about moving up, Tennessee was ranked number 14 just about 10 days ago. Now they're at number 6, Oregon at 7. They've fallen out of the top 5. Texas at 8. Wow. Texas has been on a run. Texas A&M at 9. Clemson falling to 10. Now you got Miami, Oklahoma. Then at 14 and 15, talk about 2 programs heading in a different direction. Notre Dame and Michigan. Notre Dame sitting there at 14, Michigan at 15. 2 separate sides of the coin. Michigan really happy to be there at 15. Notre Dame, this has been a kind of a sad story. They entered the summer at number 3. They're currently at 14, and they still have Deuce Knight on their commit list. Deuce Knight expected to flip to Auburn, so more pain coming for Notre Dame recruiting. All right. Let's bring on Steve Wiltfong. Steve, sorry about talking about the Irish like that with you in the waiting room, but let's talk about the hottest team this summer. Who do you think it's been on the recruiting trail?
Well, the team that I feel like I'm hovering around the most right now on the trail is Auburn. You know, the Tigers are in the top 5, on pace to sign a second straight top 10 recruiting class. How high can they go? They're in on some big names as we continue to track the Tigers. You have Deuce Knight. He's going to visit for their season opener this weekend. And I love the way that continues the trend for Auburn right now. You got Andrew Babalola, the 5-star offensive tackle. They're in the middle of those sweepstakes. They're trying to get the spatula out on all kinds of guys. Naeem Offord, 5-star corner from in-state. They're still in communication with Caleb Cunningham, 5-star receiver committed to Alabama. Now, I'm not trying to throw up some flags on that one just yet, but there is communication. So we'll see what happens when games are played this fall. Who else commits to Auburn? But they're the program that's had some of the biggest news right now. Nate Marshall flipping from Michigan to Auburn this past week. That was another huge spatula job for Hugh Freeze and company. Nate Marshall, Auburn was the leader in the spring. He was there for the spring game, visited for a game last fall. Then visits Michigan. He's from the Chicagoland, kind of abruptly commits to Michigan in the spring, really threw coaches and sources and staffs around programs like Alabama, Auburn, and Miami for a loop when he committed to Michigan. then comes back to Auburn for his official visit in June, but then goes to Michigan 2 weeks later. Looks like Michigan was able to settle the waters, get it shut down. But I think in the end, he was going to the school that he wants to go to the most in Auburn. And Auburn lands a young man that comes from terrific athletic pedigree. His mom is in the DePaul Hall of Fame for basketball. His grandfather played in the NBA for a long time. So it's a family that gets it. And Nate Marshall sees himself thriving on the plains, and Auburn's not slowing down as we head into the season.
Yeah, and I think there's levels to summer hotness when it comes to recruiting, because you had Alabama, who clearly won the month of June. Nobody turned official visits into commitments better than Alabama did during visit season. I mean, LSU, they had the shocker of the summer with landing DJ Pickett. Georgia is sitting at number 4, and they haven't even gotten hot yet, really. They've just been it's been a slow burn for Georgia. But then you got Tennessee. I mean, Tennessee's been on some level of hotness as well. And at least Tennessee fans can come out of the summer saying we really accomplished a lot when you look at the 2 pillars of that class in George McIntyre and David Sanders Jr. So a really exciting summer. I mean, Oregon, Texas A&M, even Clemson. Everybody's been having some sort of success this summer. It's been really fun, but I agree, man. Auburn is burning at a whole nother level. It's been fun to watch. All right, Steve, that being said, let's get your opinion on who do you think is going to end up finishing number 1 overall? Right now, it's a battle at the top between Ohio State and Alabama, but do you think it could be another program that comes in? Who do you got?
Yeah, I think if you're asking me who you're putting money on to finish number 1 overall, I think you go with the Georgia Bulldogs. I'm still learning how our scoring system works here at On3, Josh, but I see 2 5-stars out there for Georgia right now that I like the Bulldogs for, and Elijah Griffin and Justice Terry. That would give them 5 5-stars this cycle, which would be the most in the country if they do land those 2. And then Georgia's going to be in for a big flip. They flipped KJ Bolden, 5-star defensive back, who's already doing well for the Bulldogs at the end of last cycle. Who are they going to flip this cycle? I think they want another linebacker. I think they want another offensive lineman in this class. And so when these teams start playing games and they start doing what they do typically every year, I expect Georgia to be in the title hunt. I expect them to circle back on some guys committed elsewhere. I wouldn't be surprised if they got another big flip or 2. And again, they're trending well for those 2 5-star defensive linemen. So I think Georgia's sitting at number 4 right now. They're the program that I'm still watching the closest to ultimately finish number 1.
Georgia kind of holding a pair of pocket aces heading into the season with Elijah Griffin and Justice Terry. Like we said, Georgia hasn't even hit their run yet, so I like your pick for the Dogs finishing number 1. We'll see what happens there. Still 5 days left in the month of August. Is there any chance that we could see more 5-stars coming off the board? Andrew Babalola mainly, and Jamie French as well.
Well, for Andrew Babalola, his first game of the season is September 6th. This is a young man that wanted to commit in July.
You've been saying that.
Then he wanted to commit before his first day of school. And his first game is September 6th. So that's like the next benchmark I'm looking for. He's struggling with his decision. Now, the On3 RPM favors Stanford. The intel favored the Cardinal going into official visits. I think Stanford is starting to fade in this recruitment. He likes all his finalists, but I think that the momentum is dying down with Stanford. So who do you think the momentum is with? Michigan is a program that makes sense, but Auburn and Oklahoma are also having regular dialogue with Andrew Babalola, and there are sources around each of those programs that feel positive about their position. Same with the folks around Ann Arbor, and when you're talking to various sources, I think that the edge you would maybe give to Michigan, but you don't sleep on Auburn or Oklahoma. If Oklahoma lands Andrew Babalola, Josh, we've talked a lot about this special offensive line class that Alabama's putting together, but Oklahoma would then have the number 1 offensive line class this cycle after landing Michael Fasusi last week. To go along with Foji from the state of Texas and the other young men they have in the boat and Afalava and Holbrook. Babalola is still out there for them, but Auburn feeling good. Michigan's way in that one. I think he can come off the board before his first game, September 6th. And then Jamie French is going to announce his commitment on August 30th, five-star receiver per the On3 industry from Jacksonville Mandarin. And that one's looking like it's lining up well for Texas. Texas surged into the top 10, landing Jonah Williams, the number 1 safety in the country, on Saturday. That boosted them up to number 8. And so they're trying to push for a top 5 class themselves with Jamie French. Michael Terry, he's going to go into the season number 1 athlete in the country from in-state. He's going to visit Nebraska for the Colorado game. He's looking at the Texas-Georgia game in Austin. Texas is trying to get him there for Colorado State. Look, Michael Terry and his family, such nice people, Josh. I was talking to his dad this week, and Texas is like, hey, come to this Colorado State game. And they're like, we want to come to the Georgia game. And it's like, Texas doesn't care if you come to both of them, but they don't want to take someone else's tickets for the Colorado State game. I think they'll make room for the Terry family if you want to come to both games.
They'll print some more tickets for you.
We'll find 2 more for you. So they're trying to get them there for Colorado State. So those are the 2 5-stars that have something on deck.
All right, you guys, let us know what you think about this segment. Talk to me and Steve. How do you feel about who's going to finish number 1 overall in these 5 stars that are still on the board? Let us know. Comment section below. All right, Steve, appreciate you hopping in here. I'm going to finish up the show. We're going to talk some Florida Gator recruiting, Texas Longhorn, and Ohio State. Let's get to it. Let's talk Florida Gator recruiting. UF recruiting has picked up towards the end of summer. A big addition just today, 4-star wide receiver Nashawn Montgomery out of Miami Central just committed to the Florida Gators about 2 hours ago. Gators vaulting up the rankings. I mean, remember, 2 months ago, we were talking about the Gators in the 50s, but now UF is creeping up on a top 15 class just in time for the season. Top 10 might not be out of the question if the Gators can have a good season on the field. I got Keith Niebuhr here from Gators Online. We're going to hit on a few of the big names that UF's in play with as they head toward the season. But first, guys, hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel, the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube. All right, let's bring in the great Keith Niebuhr. Now, Nashawn Montgomery was UF's 14th commitment toward the 2025 class. But as I said, some big names still out there. Keith, let's start with Ty Jackson, On3's number 1 linebacker. And he's already said, I'm in no rush to decide. I want to see what happens on the field this season. He's not going to make his decision till December. So, Ty Jackson, is this a guy that UF can keep in state? I mean, I know they can with a good season, but what have they done with Ty Jackson to put themselves in this position?
Well, first and foremost, I think of all the remaining targets out there, he very well could be Florida's number 1 overall guy on the board. Regardless of position, regardless of side of ball, he might be the number 1 guy. He's an outstanding linebacker, as you said, number 1 in the country for On3, and he's from that West Palm Beach, Florida area. So how has Florida gotten into the mix? Well, first and foremost, he thinks he can play early at the University of Florida. That's significant. He's bonded with the coaching staff, and in particular, defensive coordinator Austin Armstrong, who's really taken the lead in this recruitment. Also, him and his family really seem to vibe with Gainesville and the University of Florida and all things encompassed in that. And one of the things they really like at the University of Florida is the Gator Made program, which is something that prepares the football players and other athletes for life beyond the arena. And, you know, sometimes you hear that and you don't think much of it, but they have made a point to bring that up in each and every single interview. Him, his father, this is significant to them. They want to make sure that their son has something going on after football. So you add it up. He's not a kid that talks a lot. He's not out there laughing it up and calling all the other recruits and all that. He's he's very focused on the mission at hand. So he's not into all that recruiting stuff. But he has really clicked with a lot of things in Gainesville, and that is keeping Florida very much in it. And maybe even you could say that Florida is certainly one of the favorites, and maybe even the favorite as we get into the week 1 of the season.
Yeah, I think that's safe to say. Now, the next prospect we're going to talk about, DJ Pickett. Yes, he committed to LSU, but back in May, he told On3 this about the Gators. Quote, I told them, all I just need to see is y'all improving and just winning. Well, Pickett decided to make his decision in July, so he didn't get to see the Gators win yet, but he will get to see the Gators because he's going to be in the swamp when UF plays Miami in just about 5 or 6 days. How important is this season for DJ Pickett and the Gators?
Well, first of all, we need to point out he's supposed to be there. He has said in repeated interviews he will be at the Swamp on August 31st. But, of course, until they actually show up, who knows?
If I had a free ticket to that game, there's no way I would miss it. So, especially if I lived in Zephyr Hills, just about 45 minutes away.
That's true, but you never take it for granted in recruiting. You need to see them first before you say, okay.
Sure,
but,
yes, you're right.
This is a good measuring stick game for him, and I'll tell you why. Because Miami is another school that was heavily recruiting DJ Pickett and continues to keep the foot apparently on the gas with him. So he'll get to watch both those teams go at it. Also, we don't know yet whether this is going to be an unofficial visit or an official visit. He has said different things on different occasions, but again, getting him there is important. He wants to see an improved Florida team, obviously, but he also wants to see what Florida secondary does under the direction of first-year secondary coach Will Harris. Now, Will Harris and DJ Pickett have clicked. They're getting along great, but he still doesn't know. I mean, he's getting to know Will Harris, but he hasn't really gotten to know what a Will Harris secondary looks like yet. So Saturday's game against Miami would give him the first chance to see what they're going to do on the field this year. Do they tackle better? Are they better in coverage? What do they look like? And then also he can gauge the secondary at Florida and also Miami and see how he would fit in with that group and, what are his chances of playing early? Because that's obviously on the mind of all these guys. So, yes, Florida can make a move potentially with him. Potentially. We'll see. Now, Josh, here's the thing. Florida's going to need a big season to impress a lot of kids. The question is, what's the right number of wins? Does 6 wins really impress a lot of people? Well, even with that schedule,
I think it's 8. I think it's 8 to 10. I mean, if they can get 8, I think some of the guys that we're talking about and are about to talk about will be in play. If they can get to 10, I think we can expect some major flips.
Well, right now, everything is sort of a leap of faith. As a coaching staff, it's, hey, trust us. This is what we're building. 8 wins shows you, hey, they went from 6 wins to 5 wins to 8 wins against that kind of schedule. That's conceivably a 10 or 11 win season against a normal schedule. So I think that's what he's going to need to see. And then, Josh, the other element of that is if you win a lot of games, you have to assume and imagine that high-level donors are going to step up their games when it comes to NIL donations. So it kind of can all work in concert. And look, for DJ Pickett, he's the number 1 cornerback in the country, Josh. He is going to command a lot of NIL worth, right?
Yeah, and especially to budge him off that commitment. Yes, of course.
That's right. So you're talking, this is not going to be an easy one. He needs to see Florida win. He needs to know that the NIL situations are at the very least going to be comparable. So there's a lot of things in play here, but it starts with Florida looking good in the secondary and winning some football games.
Yeah. All right. I know you said Ty Jackson is probably the most important prospect on the board, but also every team needs major help at offensive line. And Florida has 2 guys that I'm looking at. Tavares Dice, who's committed to Auburn. He's out of Georgia. And then Solomon Thomas. He's out of Jacksonville. He's the 5-star interior offensive lineman committed to FSU. Gators are involved with both of them to some degree. Which one do you think, if the Gators have a good season, they have a better shot at flipping?
Boy, you would think Tavares Dice on the surface, right? Because he's the one that's still talking up Florida. I mean, look, he's talking up Auburn too. I need to be fair there. He loves Auburn, and he said in interviews with me that there's a lot of things that are sort of equal between those 2 teams. And the one thing, the 2 programs, the one thing that has given Auburn the edge over Florida is he just feels a little bit more comfortable there. So a few more additional trips to Florida could maybe even out that comfort level. But let's just hypothetically say that he's always going to be a little bit more comfortable at Auburn. So how could Florida then leapfrog past Auburn? Well, you could do that with an impressive season, impressive offensive line play, offensive line development. So the left side of Florida's line, you've got some guys like Austin Barber at tackle and Najee Harris at guard, and then you've got Jake Slaughter at center. Those are guys that have really been developed by this staff, and if they take even a step or 2 forward this season and Florida looks good, you've got kind of the double whammy. Tavares Dice is looking at Florida and saying, okay, they're looking good on the field, but also they're developing guys that play my position. So, again, Josh, you're going to need that to have happen, and it would help if Auburn didn't look so good themselves, okay? I mean, it's not easy to flip guys like this.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah, but Auburn, I feel like Auburn, there's something to Auburn and Florida. They really love to throw haymakers at each other throughout, the summer, the fall, into the winter. It just never stops between those two teams.
Well, and again, they've got proximity to home with Tavares. Like, look, Auburn's got a lot of things working in its favor in that recruitment, but Florida is the one school that he is kind of given love to, the only other school. So Florida's still somewhat in that. And I wouldn't be surprised if he shows up at the Florida-Miami game. Now, Solomon Thomas, on the other hand, doesn't seem to be giving Florida much love at all lately. In fact, it's all FSU.
Or LSU, yeah.
And then some LSU, that's right. But again, now he's got friends that play on the offensive line at Florida. And if the offensive line of the Gators, we speak of Rod Kearney, who's from Jacksonville, who may have an extended role this season. Austin Barber, the starting left tackle, he's from Jacksonville. So if the Florida offensive line, again, and the team itself, you assume, Josh, for the team to win, the offensive line is going to have to play well. So it probably works together. So if they can catch his eye, now he has told other outlets that, hey, I'm not going back to Florida, but he told me that he hasn't ruled out returning to Florida. So we'll see if he can get back to Gainesville. And then, obviously FSU's offensive line, it was one game, but FSU's offensive line did not look great in the opener against Georgia Tech. And then also, so Florida's selling development. And Florida State, if you're Florida, you're going to preach to him. They haven't had an offensive lineman drafted in 5 or 6 years. So those are kinds of things. Now, obviously, Florida State may have somebody drafted this year. We'll have to see how that all plays out. But if you're a school trying to flip a guy, you've got to come up with a list of things to sell to people. So Florida's going to try to sell Solomon Thomas on development and direction of the program. Same thing with Tavares Dice. But again, you got to go out and do it now. He's got to see something from them. He's been impressionable throughout the recruiting process. Every time he visits Florida, he seems to talk up the Gators, but they've got to get him there more, and they've got to show him something. Otherwise, I think he's going to be hard to flip because, quite frankly, he is locked in pretty good with Florida State's offensive line coach, Alex Atkins, who he speaks so highly of, and they have really connected. To break that bond, to beat that bond, Florida's going to have to go really do something. And it may come down to the end. They may have to go to Tallahassee and do something in that game against FSU, too. There's a lot of things that are going to have to happen here, but I just wouldn't rule him out entirely because he's so impressionable.
All right, Gator fans, what do you think? We've previewed some of the top players that the Gators could be in the mix for if they have a big season, but what constitutes a big season? How many wins does this Florida team need to land some of the guys that we just talked about? Let us know, comment section below, and also, who do you think is the most important target still on the board? Let me and Keith know, comment section below. Texas recruiting is doing what we thought it would be doing by the end of the summer. The Horns are closing in on a top 5 class, and there's still some work to be done. Exciting times for Texas fans as the season is about to begin. Speaking about the season beginning, make sure you guys are locked into PrizePicks. I loved it last season. It's super easy. All you got to do is select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. Now, this is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have any type of skill, you can turn $10 into $1,000 with just a few taps. PrizePicks is really simple. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy app. So this week on PrizePicks, I took a look, right? I'm taking Saquon Barkley for more than 60 yards, Patrick Mahomes for more than 2 passing touchdowns, Aaron Rodgers, I got him for more than 3 passing touchdowns, and Travis Kelce for more than 50 yards. All right, I'm also going to take Odell Beckham Jr. for more than 50 yards. I know, kind of risky, but I'm doing it. PrizePicks offers weekly promotions as well that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts selected player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. Now, PrizePicks offers Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. PrizePicks is the most fun way to make a little money during the football season. So here's what we're going to do. Go to prizepicks.com/inside scoop. Use promo code inside scoop and receive a guaranteed $50 once you play $5 in lineups. That's prizepicks.com/inside scoop. Promo code inside scoop. Go do it. Daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, let's bring on Justin Wells from Inside Texas. And we were here on the On3 Recruits channel just last night for five-star safety Jonah Williams. I know we're going to get to a five-star wide receiver here in a minute, but it was Jonah Williams, the number one safety in America, committing to the Longhorns. This one went back and forth. At times it was Oregon. At times it was Texas A&M, even Oklahoma. They were involved heavily. Jonah Williams, though, now that he's on board, I mean, what does this mean for Texas recruiting at the safety position?
I still think they'd like another guy. You know, they lost Cade Phillips to LSU a few weeks ago. And so I think they would like to add another guy, you know, like a Nathan Tillman, a kid that they've been on for a little bit that just committed to Utah. But right now, I think they are more focused on kind of wrapping up this month, this five-star August. You know, they've got Jamie French who's announcing on Friday, and that one's going to be a big one. But for the safety position, you know, Jonah's just such a freak athlete, Josh. He is a hybrid in every sense of the word. He's got a package of plays. He's going to have something on offense at Texas as well. If you've ever watched his tape, he's a D1 wide receiver at the same time. And so, not to mention baseball, but I think in the safety room, Jonah adds a jolt of athleticism to a room that's got Derek Williams, Xavier Fulsame, Jelani McDonald, and I think they'll try to get one more.
Loaded. If I had to describe the safety room in one word, it's loaded. All right. Speaking of five stars, let's bring up the trusty graphic that you and I have been working off of for like the last 3 or 4 weeks. And these were Texas five-star targets committing in August. We can check Jonah Williams off. We can check Khalil Lockett off. Michael Fasusi, I mean, we can check him off. He went to Oklahoma, but hey, you're not going to land every five-star. So that brings us to 2 more five-stars on this list of guys that are committing in August. Now, we can push Michael Terry off because at this point, it doesn't look like he's going to be committing in the next 5 or 6 days. So he won't be an August decision, but we're going to talk about him. So let's look at Jamie French. He's set to decide in about 5 days, heavily trending toward Texas. I mean, this feels like a slam dunk, is it?
It's coming. It feels like the first dunk, the reverse 360 that Vince Carter did in the 2000 NBA dunk contest, where everybody and their brother just jumped through the roof. It's got that kind of vibe to it. You know, you add a big-time wide receiver with Khalil Lockett in this 2025 cycle would be huge for Chris Jackson, Steve Sarkisian, and that bunch. You know, Jamie French and Texas have been really close ever since that visit in April. They have been building a really, really strong relationship at different times. Ohio State, Tennessee, he was committed to Alabama. Miami made a push. LSU made a push. Yeah. You know, all these other schools are kind of in the mix. But at the end of the day, I think Texas has made the best presentation. I think they've done the best job. That would wrap up a very, very productive August. And when I asked Jonah Williams, you know, what are you going to do now that you're committed to Texas? His quote was, now that I'm Team Texas, I have to turn into a recruiter. And the first 2 guys I'm going to get are Jamie French and DeCorian Moore.
DeCorian Moore. Now, that's a name that we said that the Texas Longhorns would double back on. So we're going to talk about him in a second. But Michael Terry III, who do you think the biggest competition is heading into the fall?
Oh, Nebraska and Oregon. And you know what? I've thought this might be a Texas-Oregon battle for the most, but Nebraska has really thrown haymakers in this recruitment. When you send an entire staff to visit a kid at a school, that makes an impression. They have sold him completely on being a dynamic outside wide receiver, doing great things with Dylan Raiola, the big-time 5-star quarterback in Lincoln right now. So they're listening. They like that pitch. I actually caught up with Terry a couple nights ago. And he's really, you can tell the recruiting process it's a lot for him right now. I think he's really just wanting to focus on his senior year, but he realizes he's got a big decision to make. He's going to make some visits. He's going to make a trip to Nebraska. I wouldn't be surprised if he makes a trip to Oregon in September. And I think he's going to see a game at Texas in August and September as well, probably the UTSA game. And so maybe we get a decision sometime in September. I don't think this thing is going to stretch that much further. I think him and his family would love to go ahead and get the process out of the way. They just want to make absolutely sure they're making the right decision. And I think that's why Nebraska and Oregon are going to give Texas as much problem as possible.
All right, let's circle back on Decorian Moore, because I asked you a couple weeks ago if they would, if he was going to be a major flip target. And I know it was fresh off that commitment to Oregon, and I know the emotions are high and nobody wants to talk to anybody as the dust settles. But now that the dust has settled and the season is here, Decorian Moore, I mean, we can admit he's going to be the prime flip target for the Texas Longhorns heading into the season, correct?
I don't know if he's the prime flip target.
Well, then who would be?
The prime
Put
flip
the pride aside. It's Decorian Moore.
It's Decorian Moore. Look, they really want to flip a couple defensive linemen.
Yeah.
There's a couple kids from Florida State that Texas has their eyes on.
Yeah, Myron Charles out of Port Charlotte.
Kevin Wynn, Javian Hilson.
Oh, yeah,
Hilson. There's some dudes down there, okay? You're right. The number one flip target, the most talked about, will be Decorian Moore. Texas and Decorian still have a relationship. There's still a connection there. They're still reaching out. But, that one's going to take some work, Josh. That's going to take some work, but that's what the flip process is about. Yeah. He's decommitted once. They're going to try to see if they can do it again. I don't think they're going to push like they did early on in the cycle. I think they're going to let things kind of play out, because if they get Jamie French in the mix and they go on and start winning 8, 9, 10, 11 games in this season and wind up playing in the playoff, Texas winning usually cures a lot of L's. And so I think at the end of the day, they're going to stay close to Decorian. I don't think they're going to push, but they're going to remind him, hey, if you don't want to move all the way to the Pacific Northwest, you can hitch it down the road, 2-hour drive to Austin, Texas, join a couple 5-star quarterbacks, a couple 5-star receivers, a couple 5-star offensive linemen, essentially a 5-star program. They're going to keep talking to Decorian. And if you got Jonah Hill as one of your recruiters, this thing is about to get real, Josh.
Yeah. And that's what it takes. So you get a couple 5-stars on board. They start attracting more 5-stars. So Texas fans, talk to us. How do we feel about Jamie French? How do we feel about Michael Terry III? And more importantly, how do we feel about Decorian Moore? Is he your number one flip target? Let us know. Comment section below. Let's talk some Ohio State recruiting, because the Buckeyes, they have the number one class in America heading into the start of the season. And in this video, we're going to find out what major needs are still left to address. Also, after missing on David Sanders, what's next for Ohio State at the offensive line? Ohio State fans, make sure you're locked in. Hit subscribe to the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube. All right. Let's bring in Matt Parker from Letterman Row. Like I said, Ohio State, number one class in the country right now, but there's still a few needs out there. Let's start at wide receiver, because Phillip Bell, 4-star wide receiver out of Cali, is now trending to Ohio State, but it hasn't always been that way. When did Ohio State jump into the lead here?
Well, Josh, you really saw Ohio State kind of get into that pole position, if you will. After his official visit in June to Ohio State, you saw Steve Fong and Chad Simmons put in a couple of picks on the Buckeyes. And then there was some talk about, USC is going to enter in the picture. Washington was in the picture as well. But these last couple of weeks, Ohio State has really come on strong and just has made the point of come here, get developed. You'll be, we'll make you into an NFL wide receiver like we've done with however many guys you really want to name off, quite honestly, that are playing in the NFL. And so Phillip Bell is set to announce August 31st. That's the same day as week one for many, many programs, Ohio State included. They'll host Akron at 3:30 on that Saturday. And I'm expecting Ohio State to receive some good news after they pick up their first win of the season.
All right, let's talk a little bit more at the wide receiver position. Jerome Miles back on the board. He's been talked about wide receiver. He's out of Utah. How big of a priority is he for Ohio State and Brian Hartline?
I mean, he's a big enough priority, Josh, where Ohio State really late to the picture, quite honestly. I know they've liked his tape for a while now, but they never extended the offer until this summer. Now that has happened, the biggest thing is to get Miles, who I believe is a top 50 prospect, is to get him onto campus for an official visit at some point. The tricky part about that is that he's all the way out in Utah. That's not exactly close to Ohio State. And he already has a commitment date set for October 30th. Mm-hmm. So there's very limited time, quite honestly, to get that to get Miles to campus for an official visit. It's going to have to be a night game for some kind of official visit. And right now, the only night game that's on the Ohio State schedule before that October 30th commitment date is week 2 against Western Michigan. And I don't exactly think Ohio State wants to bring in a big-time wide receiver, a very polished wide receiver, in for a game where if Ohio State takes care of business, that game's going to be over in the first half. So you have, an appetizing, Iowa is before October 30th at home. That could be a night game. You have Nebraska at home, which is, again, before October 30th, I believe. That might also be a night game. So really, it's kind of just seeing how the schedule works out, how the TV times work out for Ohio State to get that official visit, because they definitely want and need to get him onto campus before he makes a decision. However, I know the RPM is very, very heavy on Utah right now. And Ohio State, I mean, they're in his final group of schools. We're just going to have to see when that official visit happens and what goes from there.
All right. Any other wide receivers on the board that Ohio State fans need to keep an eye on?
Yeah, if I'm an Ohio State fan, I'm going to keep my eye on a local guy, 3-star Pickerington North wide receiver Preston Bowman. That's a guy that many Ohio State fans that are really in the nitty-gritty of recruiting, as hopefully everyone is watching this show. That's a guy that Ohio State has, kept at arm's length for so long. He's an in-state guy. Pick North is a bit of a pipeline for Ohio State. The whole Pickerington school district is really a pipeline for Ohio State. He's committed to Kentucky right now, but he did earn his offer he earned his Ohio State offer a few days after he committed to Kentucky, and then he camped at Ohio State more than a few times. So the Buckeyes know exactly what they would get with a guy like Bowman, who, once again, he would be a guy that needs, 2-3 years to really develop into what Ohio State thinks he could be. But that's a guy Ohio State fans should certainly keep their eye on.
All right. Ohio State has had a lot of, and we're going to talk about David Sanders here in a second, but Ohio State has had a lot of success so far going into the state of Alabama and pulling top talent, whether it be Naeem Alford or Zion Grady. Zion Grady's an edge out of Alabama, but they're now working to flip 4-star defensive lineman Malik Autry from Auburn. And at the same time, though, Auburn is working to flip Zion Grady from Ohio State. Do you think there's a good chance that these two will be playing together on the next level? And will it be Ohio State or will it be at Auburn?
Well, I feel pretty good saying that Zion Grady is pretty locked in with Ohio State. Just talking with some people at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center this past week as Ohio State exits training camp, gets into regular season mode. Ohio State feels good where it sits with Zion Grady as it goes into the season. Now, the Malik Autry situation is pretty interesting. Ohio State hosted him for an unofficial visit in May. They got him back on campus for an official visit that final weekend in June. And now he is slated to visit Ohio State for the Michigan game on November 30th. Mm-hmm. And with the signing day, the early signing period starting December 4th, if Ohio State manages to get Malik Autry on campus for that Michigan game on November 30th, and then signing day is just a few days later.
Yeah.
It'd be very interesting for Ohio State, who already has 3 defensive tackles in its class. And they want more. Ohio State wants more defensive tackles. That's very well known. They have room for 4. I think we're going to get into some Jakeem Stewart conversation, who could pretty much play anywhere on the defensive line. And but Malik Autry is certainly a guy that Ohio State's been working on for a while now. He loves Larry Johnson, Buckeyes defensive line coach, has a great relationship with head coach Ryan Day. So I'm really looking to see if Autry makes it to Ohio State for that November 30th date against Michigan. Things could be really interesting for the Buckeyes.
All right, so let's talk David Sanders. Ohio State over the weekend, they needed an offensive lineman. He wasn't named David Sanders, but they did pick up a stud in Javon McFadden. He committed to the Buckeyes just yesterday. So what's your take on Ohio State offensive line recruiting, even with the miss of David Sanders Jr.? Is there a plan to replace him? Are they in a good spot right now? What's your take on offensive line?
Well, there is no way to replace a guy like David Sanders Jr., who's the number 1 offensive tackle in the On3 industry rankings. He's been a top 5 prospect his entire recruiting profile. there is no way that you can replace a talent that special. But as you mentioned, Ohio State picks up the 4-star. He's listed as an interior offensive lineman, Javon McFadden, out of Washington, D.C., Riverdale Baptist. He really projects as more of a guard, but he has that ability to be a swing tackle. What's helping Ohio State right now is that it has Carter Lowe in its class, the high 4-star out of Toledo Whitmer, who certainly projects as at the very worst a right tackle, not that kind of left tackle blindside guy that Ohio State fans have been clamoring for. But the state of offensive line recruiting is very interesting for Ohio State, because I think a lot of Ohio State fans felt like once David Sanders Jr. announced his decision to Tennessee last Saturday, it was just, well, now what? Now what? We have nowhere to go. Every single guy that we have offered is elsewhere, or is not interested in Ohio State. And Justin Fry, actually, Ohio State offensive line coach, spoke with the media this past week and got a lot of questions about recruiting. And one of the things that he mentioned was it's a long way to December. And I think Ohio State fans will remember in that 2024 cycle, Ohio State essentially flipped top 150 prospect Gabe Van Sickle, who was committed to Northwestern. Northwestern certainly has a good pedigree of sending offensive linemen to the NFL, so to get that top 150 guy. I wrote a couple weeks ago, once Sanders committed to Tennessee, a bunch of guys to just keep an eye out on. And for me, one name that I am really just looking at with a lot of intrigue is Micah DeBose, committed to Alabama right now. I think Micah DeBose, who lives in Alabama, plays high school ball in Alabama, has been committed to Alabama since June, has Ohio roots. He has family in Cleveland, Ohio, that he understands what the program means. He knows everything that it would mean to be a Buckeye. And that's just a name that I think I would keep an eye out on if I'm an Ohio State fan.
And he's no stranger to change. I mean, Micah DeBose was early on committed to Georgia. He came off that commitment. It looked like it was going to be Auburn. Then it looked like it was all LSU. In the end, it was Alabama. But Micah DeBose has a history of looking around even when he's committed. So we'll keep an eye on that. Good name there. I can't let you go without talking Jakeem Stewart. We followed him all off season, and those rumors were swirling that the number one player in the 2026 class, he's On3's number one player. He's number 4 in the industry. On3 has him a bit higher. But there was rumors all summer that maybe he's going to reclassify and become 2025. Well, season's here. Doesn't feel like he's going to reclassify. You can never actually put that to bed. But Jakeem Stewart, let's just call him a 2026 recruit. And here's the interesting part. He has said he's kind of might make a decision this fall. So even though he's 2026, On3's number one player in the 26 class is going to probably make a decision this fall. Is it looking like an LSU-Ohio State battle, and who do you think the favorite is right now?
I would certainly say it's an LSU-Ohio State battle right now. If he made a decision right now today, I would say that he's staying home. He's going to be an LSU Tiger. But the separation between LSU and Ohio State is not as big as a lot of people, may think. Ohio State is right there. They are very, very solid number 2 right now for Jakeem Stewart. He has a great relationship with a bunch of people at Ohio State, especially defensive line coach Larry Johnson, Ryan Day. But the one big relationship there in that recruitment for Ohio State is with assistant defensive line coach Alan Clark, who's from Louisiana, has that pull in Louisiana. Ohio State has a couple other staff members on its recruiting department that are from Louisiana, including Sam Petito, who Ohio State hired away from Alabama, and Kalen DeBoer, which that's a massive hire that I feel like that's not been talked about enough. That's why Ohio State has such strong position in some 2026 recruitments in Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama. But Jakeem Stewart, much like Malik Autry, is slated to visit Ohio State November 30th for that Michigan game. And if that visit happens, whether he's committed or not, I think seeing what Ohio State is like on a game day, especially for the game, that can open up a lot of eyes for him and in his camp. So once again, Josh, it's just a situation that we're going to have to keep an eye out on. But I definitely like Ohio State as it sits right now. Just they're in a good spot. I think LSU would win that recruitment if it ended today. But if he's taking his decision into the fall, that's what he's looking to do. The fall is 3 months long if you really want to look at it. So the fall could be September, it could be November. We don't know when that specific time frame would be. So again, just circle that November 30th date on the calendar for Ohio State with recruits, because that's going to be a very, very big day for 2025s, 2026s, and even some early 2027s.
All right, Ohio State fans, you heard it. There's still some needs to fill before this 25 class is over. Talk to us. Let us know. Comment section below how we feeling about Ohio State's #1 class, and do they finish at the top? Let us know. Comment section below. Well, you've made it to the end of today's video, but there's hundreds more videos on the On3 Recruits channel for you to check out. And also, while you're here, hit subscribe.